Most women don't realize the power of their silence until the moment it's too late, until he comes crawling back, haunted by the echo of what she didn't say. There is a moment, quiet, cold, precise, when a woman turns inward, not because she is weak, not because she is unsure, but because something ancient and sacred within her has awoken. This silence is not absence, it is presence. It is the language of the high priestess, the archetype who no longer argues, explains, begs, or proves. She sees all, speaks little, and knows that real transformation happens not when she tries harder, but when she withdraws her energy and lets the universe do its reckoning. To the unaware man, her silence is confusing. He feels something slip through his fingers, something he thought he had power over. His ego stirs. He replays the last things she said, the look in her eyes, the shift in her tone. But it is no longer about the words. It is about the absence of them. You see, most men do not fear confrontation. They fear irrelevance. They fear the moment when a woman no longer reacts, when she no longer burns with fury or melts with tears, because that moment signifies something final, something far more terrifying than rage. Indifference. The animus-driven man, the one still asleep in his masculine immaturity, thrives on control. He wants to know that he can trigger her, stir her, own even her pain. But when she falls silent, he is met with a mirror. And the mirror doesn't lie. It shows him who he truly is without her emotional labor propping up his illusions. The silent woman becomes the void, and in the void, he meets himself. But silence, in its most evolved form, is not a tactic. It's not a punishment. It's not manipulation. It is a rite of passage, a turning inward, a declaration of inner sovereignty. It is when the feminine finally recognizes that not every battle is worth her essence. Not every man deserves to hear the depths of her soul. Not every betrayal is worthy of a response. Some wounds are best answered with distance. Some disrespect can only be met with the hollow space of nothingness, where his own conscience must echo louder than her voice ever could. And here lies the paradox. When you stay silent, when you stop explaining yourself, stop proving your love, stop performing your pain, he doesn't win. He spirals. He begins to feel the storm that brewed in your chest, not as a lecture, but as a loss. The masculine psyche is wired for pursuit, for challenge, for meaning. When you give him your words too freely, he devalues them. When you fill every silence with reassurance, he forgets your mystery. But when you withhold, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity, he is forced to confront the weight of his actions. No more buffer, no more emotional hand-holding, no more decoding his chaos, only silence. And the terrifying mirror it brings. This is the work of individuation, the sacred process Carl Jung described as becoming whole, becoming real, becoming true. When a woman silences her outer voice, it is often because her inner one has finally risen to the throne. She stops seeking justice in the external world and becomes justice within herself. You, woman, are not here to carry a man's guilt like an offering. You are not his emotional sponge. You are not his spiritual rehab. You are the mountain he could not climb. You are the silence he cannot escape. You are the storm that left, not in thunder, but in quiet, dignified withdrawal. And in that silence, you do not weaken. You sharpen, you refine, you come home to yourself. You begin to see that his suffering is no longer your concern, that his realization, his regret, his unraveling, those are sacred fires he must walk through alone. You gave him your softness, you gave him your voice, and still, he doubted. Now he will feel what it means to miss a woman who no longer needs to be heard by him, because she has been heard by herself. He may sit with other women, laugh with them, text them, touch them. He may post pictures, go out, pretend to have moved on. But in the quiet hours, when the masks fall and the ego grows weary, your silence will speak louder than their laughter ever could, Because the feminine imprint is not physical, it's energetic. When a woman gives from her soul, when she loves from her archetypal depths, she marks a man, not in ways he can see, but in ways he feels, in his dreams, in the pauses between distraction, in the smell of something that reminds him of her presence, in the sound of a voice that doesn't quite measure up. He tries to forget, he tries to replace, but the psyche doesn't lie. It stores everything, every glance, every sigh, every sacred word she once gave him freely. And when that supply ends, when her light retracts and the portal closes, his unconscious begins to mourn. Not the woman, necessarily, but the version of himself he felt in her presence, the man he could have been. This is the hidden truth most women never realize. It's not your silence that breaks him. It's the man he becomes in its absence. Because the truth is, many men only realize the gravity of what they had when it no longer responds to them. When the sacred feminine no longer bends to soothe their wounds, when she no longer stands in the ruins of his inconsistency, waiting for him to build a home. You were the oracle, the one who saw him. And it was easier for him to run from your gaze than to rise into the man it required him to be. So he projected. He blamed your neediness, your expectations, your drama, all the while hiding from the terrifying demand your soul placed on his. Grow or lose me. You didn't ask for too much. You just stopped pretending you were okay with so little. And now he sits in silence, haunted by the unspoken, haunted by what you didn't say when you finally left, haunted by the fact that you didn't beg, didn't cry, didn't fall apart, because somewhere deep down he knows that's the woman who never returns. And maybe he still sends messages into the void. Maybe he tries to bait a reaction. Maybe he posts, parades, pretends, but you do not bite. Because you have tasted your own power now, and it is more nourishing than the scraps of his affection ever were. You've come to understand what the Stoics knew all along. Detachment is not indifference, it is mastery. Seneca said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." And how much of your sacred life have you wasted waiting for someone to become ready, to see you, to choose you? No more. This silence is not passive. It is a fierce boundary. It is a portal to rebirth. You've stepped into your feminine sovereignty, no longer a girl seeking validation, but a woman who has become the container of her own worth. And as he sits in his echo chamber, hearing nothing but the sound of his own regret, he will come to understand a cruel but necessary truth. He taught you how to live without him. And you learned, oh how you learned, to dance without looking back, to love yourself in ways he never could, to mother your wounds, to sit with your shadow, to hear your own voice above the noise. He will suffer, yes, but not because you wanted him to, because he chose not to listen when you were still speaking. And now your silence is the only thing he hears. There's a moment in every woman's life when she stands at the threshold of herself, no longer the maiden who waits, pleads, or proves, no longer the wounded healer hoping her love will redeem his apathy. She becomes the queen, not by being crowned, but by walking away, in silence, with fire in her chest and grace in her stride. And the man she left behind, he begins to feel her everywhere, not in her presence, but in her absence, not in the warmth of her voice, but in the void where it used to be. His days continue, but her silence lingers like smoke, unseen, yet suffocating, because the feminine, when fully embodied, doesn't need to scream to be heard. Her silence echoes into the bones of a man's unconscious, confronting him with what he lost, and more painfully, why he lost it. This is not vengeance. This is karma. Not the mystical retribution of the stars, but the psychological law of the soul. What you do not value, you lose. What you delay decays, and what you fail to rise for, you eventually mourn. You see, most men have not been initiated into the depth of feeling. They live on the surface, chasing novelty, fearing vulnerability, calling it freedom. But when a conscious woman loves them, they are faced with something ancient and demanding. Her gaze is not passive, it is penetrating. She sees the boy behind the mask. She sees the cowardice behind the pride. She sees the potential he avoids. And that terrifies him. So he pulls away, hides, distracts himself with women who don't challenge him. He seeks the easy, the shallow, the undemanding. But even in their arms he hears her name, not from their lips, but from the ache in his own soul, the ache of unfinished initiation. Because the woman he lost wasn't just a lover, she was a mirror, a test, a door, and he failed. And when she went silent, she wasn't being cold. She was letting him sit in the consequences of his choices. She was giving him the dignity to meet his own shadow, rather than dragging him toward the light he refused to seek. You woman, you became the storm that receded, not to punish him, but to protect yourself, because you saw that explaining yourself over and over wasn't intimacy. It was a slow, spiritual death. And so you chose the sacred path of retreat. You chose your peace over his potential. You chose to stop bleeding for a man who refused to heal himself. And though your silence might feel heavy at times, though your heart may still carry the echoes of what could have been, know this: your silence is not empty. It is full, full of wisdom, full of boundaries, full of love that now turns inward toward the one who deserves it most, you. He will scroll through old messages, reread your words, try to decipher your quiet. He may even return with promises and poetry and regret. But understand, the real test is not whether he comes back. The real test is whether you still need him to. Because once a woman has tasted her own self-worth, once she has sat with her pain and not run from it, once she has faced her longing and not begged it to leave, she no longer craves a man to complete her. She chooses, or she walks, and the man who once thought her silence was surrender will come to understand that it was the sound of her rising. Oh, ChatGPT dis, there is no deeper agony for an unconscious man than realizing he misjudged the woman who held the key to his becoming. Not because she punished him, not because she wounded his pride, but because, when the time came, she did nothing. No reaction, no retaliation, just stillness. And in that stillness, something ancient was invoked. The full withdrawal of feminine essence. He expected drama. He expected heartbreak, perhaps even a final plea. Because that's how it had always gone. Emotional theatrics that made him feel significant, desired, needed. But what he didn't expect was the void. The sovereign, unsettling quiet, the absence that didn't beg to be filled. It's in that absence that the reckoning begins. You see, silence is not a gap, it is a statement. It is the mature feminine's way of declaring, I am no longer available to your confusion. I will not audition for your love. I will not participate in my own diminishment. And for a man still asleep to his soul, this silence is unbearable. Because now, for the first time, he's not watching her fall apart. He's watching her disappear, not physically, emotionally, energetically, spiritually. She has exited the stage, taken her light with her, and left him alone in the theater of his delusions. Now his only company is himself, and that's where the suffering begins. Because the feminine, when expressed through the archetype of the lover, the muse, the healer, brings meaning to the masculine. She's the one who awakens him to purpose, to feeling, to depth. Her energy calls him out of survival and into soul. But when he refuses the call, she becomes the one who walks away from him in silence. And the silence she leaves behind is not cold. It is sacred. It is the divine disconnection that creates space for his descent. Descent into what? Into shadow. Into his own emotional reckoning, into the grief of what he neglected, mocked, or dismissed. He begins to see, often far too late, that she was not asking for too much. She was asking for truth, for presence, for a man to meet her in his fullness, but he gave fragments, and now those fragments return to him like ghosts, whispers of what could have been, echoes of love unchosen, not because it wasn't there, but because he was too afraid to claim it. The silence now burns, not because it's cruel, but because it's just. It is the response the feminine gives when she's moved past wanting to be understood and into being whole. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of individuation, the integration of all one's parts, shadow and light, desire and fear, need and detachment. And it begins when a woman stops outsourcing her healing to the man who wounded her and starts listening to the inner voice she once silenced for him. You women are not meant to be an echo of his inconsistency. You are not here to dim your radiance to keep him comfortable. You were born with the wisdom of the great mother and the fire of the warrior. And your silence is not empty space. It is a boundary made of steel wrapped in roses. He will remember you, not for the things you said, but for the words you never spoke, the way you didn't explain what he already knew, the way you didn't demand what you clearly deserved, the way you didn't beg even when your heart was bleeding. That is what haunts a man, the knowing that you saw it all, his cowardice, his withholding, his ambivalence, and still you chose to walk away with dignity rather than chase clarity from a man too fragmented to offer it. That is what changes him, and whether or not he ever becomes the man you once hoped for is no longer your concern, because you've remembered something vital. Your silence is not passive. It is the roar of a woman reclaiming her voice by no longer giving it to someone who refused to listen. Some men only awaken after devastation, when the chaos has quieted, when the supply of attention has dried up, when the once constant voice is no longer there to soothe, to challenge, to love. And by then the woman is gone, not just in body, but in essence. She no longer orbits his world. She has returned to her own. This is the alchemy of silence. Because silence, when born from self-respect, is the feminine's most potent power. It does not seek to control. It simply is, magnetic, unmoved, untouchable. He walks through his days pretending nothing has shifted, but there it is, the phantom of her presence woven into the corners of his mind. He remembers her in the mundane, a song, a phrase, the way she used to pause before speaking. He remembers not because he chooses to, but because the soul does not forget what the ego failed to honor. And this suffering, slow, quiet, unnameable, is not caused by her. It is revealed by her absence. There's a reason so many men panic when the woman they took for granted falls silent, because they know, even if only unconsciously, that this silence is not temporary. It is the sound of a woman who has finally come home to herself. You see, silence is the final boundary, the last word, the closing of a chapter written in tears, in passion, in hope, when you no longer engage, no longer explain, no longer react. You are no longer available for anything less than truth, and truth, to the emotionally immature man, is terrifying, because it asks him to show up fully, to be consistent, to be present, to be worthy, and that requires more than charm or longing. It requires initiation, the kind of soul-deep transformation that only happens through loss. Your silence initiates him, not into your world, but into his own, into the hollowness of his patterns, the echoes of his avoidance, the bitter taste of missed opportunity. He may try to replace you, but the women who follow will be pale reflections, because they will not challenge him, they will not mirror his higher self, they will not carry the sacred fire he ran from in you. And eventually he will come to understand what he thought was silence was actually a ceremony, a farewell. A funeral for the boy he refused to outgrow, a quiet coronation for the woman who no longer waits. Because the woman who chooses silence over self-betrayal is not weak. She is dangerous, she is untouchable, she is free. She has transcended the cycles of emotional labor, of overgiving, of making excuses for the man she loved. She no longer yearns to be chosen, because she has chosen herself. And once a woman tastes the peace of her own company, once she dances in her own mystery, once she is no longer afraid to be alone, she becomes a force of nature. Not every man can follow her there. Not every man was meant to. Some were only meant to be the catalyst, the shadow, the lesson. And while they spiral in the aftermath, trying to decipher the silence they once dismissed, she walks forward, steady, luminous, unbothered. Because silence, when rooted in love for self, is not emptiness. It is completion. He will suffer, and not because you stayed silent, but because in your silence he finally heard the truth. You were never his to keep, only his to rise for, and he didn't. The woman who turns to silence does not vanish. She transcends. She does not close her mouth out of fear or defeat. She closes it because words are no longer worthy of what she's become. Explanation, defense, pleas, they belong to the past version of her, the one who still believed she could pull love out of a man with enough softness, enough patience, enough pain. But she knows now. Real love does not need to be dragged out of someone. It rises, or it never was, and so she lets him go, not with bitterness, but with reverence. Because she understands, not all souls are ready, not all men are brave. Some will spend their entire lives circling what they desire most, terrified to claim it, and that's not her burden to carry. He will watch her life unfold from afar. He will see her rise, not in spite of him, but because of the wound he left behind. That wound, that silence, that sacred breaking point, it became her initiation into something vast, untouchable, and whole. She will glow differently now, not for him, not for anyone, but for the woman within who waited years to be seen, and was finally met in the mirror of her own gaze. Because the silence she chose was never a weapon. It was a sanctuary. It was where she met herself, where she remembered that her worth was not in how much she endured, but in how little she was willing to tolerate once she awakened. You, woman, are not here to teach a man how to love you by suffering. You are here to embody the kind of love that teaches by existing, fierce, full, unbending in its truth. And when he finally understands what he lost, not just a woman, but the woman who would have walked beside him into everything he could have become, it will not be your voice he hears. It will be the silence that remains, the silence that says, I waited, I watched, I hoped, and then I chose myself. And no matter how many years pass, how many women come and go, how loudly he distracts himself from the hollow ache inside, her silence will stay with him, not as a wound, but as a reminder of what it means to lose something sacred because he was not ready to rise, a reminder that not all women return. Some become oceans too vast to chase, some become mountains too high to climb, and some, the rarest ones, become silent, forever beyond his reach. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.